Good morning. I thought maybe for the record, my record, I left off last night about the polls. Um, when you sort of put it together, and I never took the time simply because if I'm going to make a presentation, I normally like to be able to provide the graphics, the schematics, the math, the physics, so that people can copy, the images so they can sort of put it in their own library, share it with others, see how it sort of fits and makes pretty good sense because what's happening right now has not only been prophesied by the Mayans, but when you understand how the constellations move, how the universe has a natural order in which all the star systems rotate and spin, just like our galaxy does, there is a natural order in place on how and why things happen the way that they do, which is all based on the greater good of everybody in the cosmos, because the source from which all living light come and living spirit loves all of us. Okay? And you know that by experiencing that within your own heart wheel. So that becomes self-knowledge, which is a self-reference. Okay? That's pretty easy for all of us to know. So I left off last night with talking about the pole or a pole shift. This is nothing new, okay? It's all well documented in the archaeological or the fossil record, okay? It's well known in physics. It's well known amongst all the tribes and the clans. And there's a reason why that is, because this is a classroom, okay? It means that this is not like a permanent facility in which everything is static and stays the same. Okay, when you realize you have your creative imagination, you can move from one image in your third eye to the next one. You begin to realize things change, and they change at a very fast rate because the energy or the cosmos is always on the move. So when you realize that you're in a planet ship that runs on a warp drive, okay, it's stretching time, spiraling. The galaxy itself is moving at a particular speed. So when you realize that the light is up because the electrons are moving at a high speed, just like your Merkaba is spinning at a high speed, then you're up in peace, harmony, and balance with the speed of the galaxy, huh? So we don't want the galaxy to slow down, do we? Because if it's losing its light, it's losing its speed, which means it's losing too many of its electrons. Now you begin to understand the nature of what a universe killer is. They feed on our electrons, slow everything down, because they can't generate any of their own light, which is generating any love. And that's as basic as it gets when you know that you live in an electric universe, because all you have to do is, as they were doing in the 16th century, dissecting a frog and realizing that electric current moves muscle. Okay? So just go plug in a light bulb in your house and you realize, hey, that just turned on the filament of the bulb. So if you're running too much negative current, what happens? You burn the filament out, right? Same thing works with us. So I just wanted to, because I normally leave everything that Patty Broussard, Gaia Shaman, commander of the Earth Defense Forces, for those that don't know this, she worked with NASA. She was part of the United States Army's what's known as the Freedom Team. Okay? They were conducting special operations, particularly going into Iraq to get looking glass technology from Saddam Hussein. A lot of people didn't know that. Looking glass technology has been around forever. So when you have demons that have the ability to look at all the different potentials of a timeline, and they know how to shift the consciousness of humanity by simply using communication technology programming into your DNA, then you begin to realize that they can not only predict what you're going to do, they're the ones that are sending the thought form algorithms that get recorded in your DNA. So all they have to do is trigger the lower frequency response in 4 million beings, and that will shift, okay, steer more of those experiences that others are experiencing in which others' batteries get strained. So that means that there has to be an enormous amount of light workers and light warriors here that are doing what? Maintaining the balance between a black hole and a white hole. Now we're back to the 7 seconds of darkness and the Julian calendar and why they changed the clock. So how does the clock fit into all this? Well, think about it. the speed of the electrons, and the movement of electrons, because everything on this planet moves through electricity. All the clocks, as I mentioned before, that are set up on the planet that are timetables. Every time a plane lands in an airport, okay, delivering batteries, which are all the batteries in the airplane, represent electromagnetic energy that is experienced by every battery in that airplane. Okay, when FedEx makes a delivery into Reno, Nevada, or makes a delivery into Tokyo, Japan, makes a delivery into Beijing, China, okay, that is electromagnetic energy that's being delivered in a very specific rate of speed in geospace, geometric space, in this case a third dimension, which is duality, because the nature of the way that we do things, not every state of consciousness that is on this planet is manifesting using creative imagination in which they're not running on any unconscious memory. Okay, which means they're running on unconscious memory in order to use their state of consciousness to follow rule-based functions in order to carry out the task modalities of what everybody does that is based on the speed in which they do it. Add that all up on a planetary scale with 7.5 billion batteries and you get it. Okay? So that's why when you look at the Speak project, for example, with Kim Ko-eun, and she talks about energy allocation units, those are energy allocation units that are coupled to what? Synchronized to a time clock. Whose time clock? Okay? When you're outside time, there is no clock. There's just energy. That means that the entire cosmos is nothing but energy. So the placement or the place that you occupy, the waves between a clock and no clock, is based on the speed of your spin of your Merkaba. Okay? So they want to keep everybody stuck to a time clock in the allocation of energy units. So we know better than that. Okay? Particularly when it comes to manifestation. Being able to manifest what it is that you're now experiencing. That is the creative power within us when you're running that much magnetic light to be able to do that. So you are manifesting and thus experiencing in a bidirectional mirror what you are creating at the same time in which you're manifesting it. That means money doesn't exist in your mind, but it exists when you're using artificial intelligence to slow the clock down, slow the speed down. Because whenever you're using your hands in order to build a tool, to extract things out of the planet in which to do it with, to build things, is a time-consuming process, because I could, in my mind, think of an image, for example, a vehicle that I just manifested in my mind, which means I have an image of it, and every single moving part that operates that particular image as a vehicle is in my mind. In other words, the concept, all of the materials, and all the elements within the entire cosmos that are necessary to make it run, because we understand what is required in order for it to operate the way in which it was conceived and perceived in our mind is already there, and now poof, there it is. If I have to stop and say all of the information which represents how it operates, how it works, and what you would call a bill of materials, which means these are all the necessary elements that I need to extract from the earth, like silica, chromium, magnesium, potassium, iron ore, aluminum, whatever the necessary materials are that are already in your mind that go into the working component parts of how that particular ship is perceived and thus works, is already known. So therefore I just manifested it. Just that fast, there it is. That's manifestation in real time, which is immediate, because the speed at which it's being experienced is measured on a scalar scale. So now if we're going to do it using artificial intelligence, which means now we're going to simulate it, artificially put it together. Because if it's already been manifested in real time, that's what makes it real, because you're the one that's experiencing it in your mind. We manifested it using our own creative imagination. So now what we're going to do is, in a very real way, is duplicate it. But we're going to duplicate it by extracting energy from the girl on the planet. So now that I have a picture of that image and all of the necessary component parts and how it works, because I can take a spiral bounder and I can write down exactly how this particular ship is going to operate based on the way in which the universe works electromagnetically, to be able to show you why it works the way that it does. And these are the elements that are going to be put together as all the working component parts in which it will operate the way that I want it to operate, because I know how it will be able to operate in an electromagnetic energy field. So now that I've got all of that information in my mind, I'm going to take that information from my mind. I'm going to write it all down, much like an architectural designer would do on a drafting table, for example, and then use all the geometric tools and a calculator in which I now describe how it's all done. And then I use the compass, if you will, and the measurement of a ruler and a protractor and all the rest of it to draw the image. And then on the left side will have a legend, and the legend will describe how it works and all the materials that will be necessary in order to put it together. Then I would need to put together a workforce or build it myself, upon which takes time. So how long does it take in order for me to start with an image in my mind, in order to extract all the necessary materials that come from the girl and the planet, and the people that I'm going to have with me, unless I do it myself, to gather all those materials, and then bring it back to a shop, and then put it together, and then use it as, if you will, a prototype vehicle, test it to see if it works as designed, and thus it becomes a working product. How long does it take to do all that just to build one ship versus manifestation? That's the difference between duality. Using artificial intelligence between a black hole and a white hole in order to make something using the elements of the planet in which to do it with, versus manifesting it. So the point of all this exercise is, when we talk about Operation Sunset, and they talk about a reset, a financial reset, okay? The biggest question that I have out of this is the same question I had before. Hand somebody $1 million to a parasite. What do you think a parasite or a demon is going to do with $1 million? Demons do what demons do. Okay? In other words, what we use our mind for, this gets back to my childhood when I began to realize, if you have acquired knowledge, and that knowledge is thus measured by what you do with that knowledge, is a scalar measurement. So if you know and I know that we are what love is, and love and service to others, then we know that if we're going to use all those electrons, which is represented by currency, in which to facilitate how we have thriving relationships and thriving communities in which we can conduct trade and travel networks with other Star Nation families, that's one thing. But if we're using that money in which to conduct self-indulgence and perversion of nature, which is what Frankensteins and demons have been doing on this planet, then you can understand why the balance between the dark and the light became a distorted energy field. Which means that you have lower frequency beings that are draining the batteries and others that are running higher frequency energy. So how do you balance out the difference between the two, which is the difference between the light and the dark, that are in peace, harmony, and balance with each other, when you have millions and millions of demons on this planet? Which means resetting the financial system is not going to correct the problem. What we're talking about here is solving an energy problem, which is restoring the peace, the harmony, and balance of the electromagnetic grid, which doesn't have anything to do with money. It has everything to do with energy, because that's all there is. So we're talking about what it is that we all do on an individual basis to do the inner work to restore the peace, the love, the harmony, and balance with the spin of our own Merkaba. Okay? Because for people to actually believe that money is going to solve an energy problem that exists within us is not how it gets solved. It requires energy work that we do within our own selves, and the measurement of that can be measured across every community as to how many beings are back in peace, love, harmony, and balance within their own energy field, and how we can measure that across every single relationship between every being that has an interface with other beings that we can measure from one family to one community to one state to one nation to other planets and other star systems. That's how we measure it, is on an individual basis, to a community basis, to a state basis, to a nation basis, to a planet basis, to a star system basis. Which means restoring the peace and the harmony within this galaxy in all star systems within Laniakea as a result of what happened here. Okay? So the reason I just ran out of time. But I thought it was probably important to, since I got about 7 minutes left, I don't know if I'll be able to get that much in here. But I'll just tell you what I know to be true. In August of 2017, actually a little bit before that, Patty had done some critical work, which was to restore, essentially what she did is collapsing an enormous amount of timelines, what are known as fake timelines or engineered timelines. Remember I talked about how engineering, electrically, socially engineering consciousness, which is based on low frequencies, which means they're not even aware of how it is, their own DNA, okay, because you have a built-in time clock in your DNA that is designed that over a period of time, based on the speed of your learning, allows you to reach a certain point in your own coursework to where you are generating more light because you've learned how to manage and master your energy field and the spin rate and rotation of your Merkaba to where you are now a lighthouse and an energy giver because you have learned how light works. Being source connected, you are simply like a conduit. So you are spinning the light that is coming through your heart, and that allows you to be able to burn, if you will, an enormous amount of energy at a high rate of speed, which is why the Merkaba, when it's pushing out indigo color and the blues, is why it's like the processor is getting cooled down so we don't burn up, okay? So you're wanting to run at a very high rate of speed because when you're doing that and you're emitting an enormous amount of high frequency energy, then it means you've learned how to do that. Your soul is cleansing the temple, the physical body that the spirit is in, is running at a high rate of speed because our state of consciousness knows how to do this. So that is a measurement of our learning. So in other words, the classroom has a given period of time known as the back-tune harmonics, in which graduation takes place based on the rotation of the classroom around the Milky Way galaxy. And when it's time to graduate, it's time to move on. That was 2013. That's when class gets dismissed, which means now that you become a lighthouse, which can be measured over the coursework of your DNA when you punched your ticket in here, means there is a record on file of how well you did while you were here to learn how to become a lighthouse, which means you've learned how to keep up with the rest of the galaxy. You've learned how to keep up with the rest of the universe. Hey, welcome to the rest of the universe. Welcome to the heavenly realms. You are now experiencing the heavenly realm within you that everybody else is experiencing because we've all learned how to spin our Merkaba at a high rate of speed. Welcome to graduation. It's a pass or fail course. Okay? Now that's pretty simple, straightforward stuff. But when you begin to realize what happened here as a result of interplanetary corporate pirates, which is the black and white with the skull and bones on a pirate ship. So all you have to do is, instead of a wooden ship, think of a spaceship, a star cruiser. Okay? Because that's what they do. They pillage and plunder and kill off planets. So that's what they were attempting to do here. So those are all your parasites. Those are your demons. They don't have any light or love to give to anybody. They don't spin their Merkaba at a high rate of speed, where they're broadcasting high frequency love energy, source connected, in which they do that. So you can tell that by measuring their behavior. That's a measurement of their coursework. So the Anunnaki bred with the Draco. So the Anunnaki and the Draco are in cahoots with each other. Now, I don't have the ability here to show you the little Dyson sphere of the planet ship that they occupy, okay, as a result of all the monatomic gold that they stole off the ocean floor. It was the Anunnaki that did that. Okay, so they're in league with the Dracos. So as a result of that, it meant that an enormous amount of light forces had to come in here and kick their butt. And they did that. And they began doing that from the record that I looked at in 1997. And then I ran across Patty, and I was supposed to run across her exactly when I ran into her, because her core frequency identity is in my database. This is like future proves past. Your intuition was led to meet her exactly when I was supposed to meet her, in order to learn what it is I was supposed to learn at the exact moment in which I learned it. That allowed me to use that information with the other things that I already know to help speed up the process of essentially accelerating the speed and the higher frequency of those that become more aware, because now they're running more light, which means now they have more knowledge to understand how this works, so they can get the speed of the Merkaba up, because we're going to shift. So what ended up happening in 2017, which meant now that we move from the outer space end of things, which means now that their bases in Saturn and their moons and their battle platforms they had set up were all taken out. So now you began to realize that now that the war in space had been pretty much been secured, now it becomes a matter of purging all of their bases and taking out all of the stuff that they were doing here on the planet, and subterranean now has to get cleaned up. And that wasn't going to happen overnight. So in other words, they took care of everything out of everything in the Sol system, which is known as the space sector. And now that meant that everything on the ground in Earth itself has to get cleaned up as well. And that's what's happening now. So while that was happening, the Battle of the South Pole, which is where the Nazis and the Draco had a base, okay, which is why everybody was forbidden to going down to Antarctica, okay, there was the Battle of the South Pole. That's where Battlestar Athena took out the Scott Amundsen power generating station, and I happen to have a picture of that, and I put it up for those that managed to be able to see it, okay, took out the power generating station, and that's when the Ring of Midas was recovered. Now, what ended up happening was you had Midas, which was Tiamat, that was, there's an old sculpture that shows, for example, where Anu, as I remember it, the king of the Anunnaki was handing, the Ring of Midas was being exchanged between Midas and Anu, or Anu to Midas. I can't remember exactly the two exchanged, but the point is that Marduk killed Midas and took the Ring of Midas. Okay? So now this gets into Kim Go-Goon and Marduk, okay? Except that during the Battle of the South Pole, it was Patty Broussard, who's Gaia Shaman, Micmac tribe, twin spirit, who recovered the Ring of Midas. Patty Broussard has the Ring of Midas, and those are the builder's tools. She's Gaia Shaman. Okay? So, being White Bear Clan, and it's necessary for me, obviously, to have learned these things because we're native to this planet. So we got the planet back. Okay? So all the other beings here that represent beings who come from other star systems are basically visitors to our planet. Okay? So first law of nations, which is first law, which is love is the law, is being restored here. That's why the Executive Order 13818, which means human rights abuses are ending. Okay? Which means we're restoring first law. Okay? Because as the tribes and the clans here, it is our responsibility to maintain the peace, to maintain love as the law, and be the teachers and the healers down here. Okay? So I perceive things because of that on a much different level than most of the people who've been here just learning how all this works. Okay? This planet is being restored because it was invaded and taken over